I'll start by saying that, and as you all probably know, that there are a few foreigners in the audience that, and it's probably true of most countries actually, in South Africa there's a crisis in education. Open any of the newspapers on almost any given day and you'll find a litany of reasons why we should all panic, flee, immigrate, etc. So I'm not proposing that, and I'm actually quite optimistic. But just yesterday in the office, two numbers came up. One, between grade 10 and grade 12, almost 50% of South African learners drop out of school, so in those last 3 years. And 80% of our schools are considered dysfunctional. And I don't say that to make everybody depressed and reach for the polls. As I said, I am optimistic. But I do think that we need to have a real sense of urgency about addressing some of the issues in the education system. And I think some of the pieces are there. So I think we can do a lot, but we definitely can't mess about. So the reason I'm optimistic is essentially why I've changed what I do with my life. I was studying to be a physicist once upon a time, a long time ago. That's no longer the case, and I don't practice physics at all. And I'm going to tell you just a little story about what happened to me in the beginning, and then I'll tell you why I'm really optimistic about where we can go and why community is fundamentally important to that. So in 2002, I was doing my master's in physics at the University of Cape Town, UCT. And one piece of background information is that every year there's a science festival in Grahamstown in the Eastern Cape. And it's actually quite large, 70,000+ people go to it. It's aimed at school, and it's a really great event. There's lots of opportunities for students from all over the country to come and see really exciting science initiatives, presentations, international scientists come and do demonstrations of all sorts of different types. It's really good for kids to get an experience. And when I was a master's student in 2002, I got co-opted into being the physics representative as part of the UCT stand at the science festival. And we had a really big stand, 10 stations, each manned by a person from a different department within the faculty. I got physics, stand number 1. The theme was seeing the world through science that year, and I was explaining fundamental properties of waves to people that came by. And every other station within the science faculty presentation built on the principles of waves. So this is great. And there's one really nice thing that they do at the Science Festival. The Eastern Cape is one of the provinces that's struggling more than others with education. There are lots of really under-resourced schools. They're really struggling. A lot of buses are sponsored to bring learners from these schools who wouldn't otherwise get an opportunity. Their parents aren't going to bring them. Their teachers they don't have the resources to bring them. So they get bussed in. And they go around in groups, often with a translator because English isn't their first language. And they get to see all of these great demonstrations and participate in some of the activities, etc. So I saw many of these groups. And the one day a group came to me. The Science Festival was a week long, 7 days. One of these groups came to me. They'd been on a tour the previous day, so they'd been subjected to my presentation the previous day. What they'd done is they'd gone and pooled their meager financial resources, bought a notebook and a pen, and they brought this to me and they asked me would I write down everything I'd explained about the fundamental principles of waves, because they didn't have any textbooks. Their teacher wasn't going to explain it to them. They said she didn't understand it. I can't verify that. But they were in grade 12 and they knew it was in their exam at the end of the year. And they wanted to know this. They wanted this information. They wanted access to this. So the important thing here is that kids do want to learn, even if their school is dysfunctional. It's not a case that the learners don't care. There are many out there that really do care. They just don't have any opportunity to learn, and that's completely unacceptable. So I did what I could. You go and write down a few sentences, a page and a half over lunch, whatever. But you can't really do anything meaningful. And if you don't know physics, or you don't know science, how's the maths being taught at your school, etc. So if you really want to help them, you actually have to write down all of the physical science curriculum and all of the maths that it's built on, and that's quite a lot of stuff to do over a lunch break. But I thought we should do that. And the thing that, for me, that's really important is that that information should be available, right? The properties of waves isn't something new. It's not something cutting edge. It's not what we're going to use for the next invention that's going to make somebody a billionaire. This stuff's been known for centuries, and millions of people could write it down, and these learners should have access to it. But they need access to it in a curriculum-aligned fashion for it to be useful, because they're going to sit for an exam. And most of the resources out there that are curriculum-aligned, they can't get access to, or I couldn't make available to them because of issues like the copyright license they're under. I couldn't go and copy an entire book and give it to them because that's illegal. So I decided that we should just liberate that information If there are many people that know this information, and specifically the graduate students of the University of Cape Town studying chemistry and physics and mathematics, why don't we all just get together, write it all down once and for all, and make it freely available? So I figured we could do that and convince a bunch of students to try at least. Convince them that we'd do it in a weekend. We'd haul ourselves up, pizza, we'd be done on Monday, just crank out some books. So it took 5 years, not a weekend. But we did it. We did it. We did it collaborating online in the end. A community of students, and mostly students from all over the world at the end of the day. And by early 2007, we had grade 10, 11, and 12 maths and physical science textbooks, collaboratively authored, freely available. And we wanted to have a massive impact. We didn't have a massive impact. We did have an impact. I'll tell you 2 quick anecdotes. We got a couple of years later, we got an email from Kutlwana Radebe, student. In the testimonial, it says, I was failing mathematics in grade 12. I got copies of your grade 10, 11, and 12 maths books, worked through them from cover to cover, and a couple of past papers, and I got 79% for maths at the end of matric and got into the University of Johannesburg to do engineering. So we fundamentally changed somebody's life. I believe that the opportunity to go to university is something that can fundamentally alter your life, hopefully in a positive way. The other anecdote is about a teacher teaching at a small Christian school in Pietermaritzburg, Grant Hillebrand, a school run in a church hall, actually. So an independent school, but very poor. And they used our books because our books were freely available. They made a deal with a local printer to print them at cost, scaled down to A5, so there was less paper involved, and that was the textbook that they used, and it saved them a lot of money. So that's really cool. So we had an impact, but we really wanted to have a national impact. So now, the important thing about our books that makes them fundamentally different to just having one of the other textbooks be freely available is that they were collaboratively authored. So a community came together to author those books that bought into this idea that we could liberate this information in this way. And the other thing is that we released them under what we call an open copyright license. So traditionally, a copyright license starts with a phrase like all rights reserved and then lists all the things you can't do. Open copyright licenses say, actually, you can copy this, you can change it, you can adapt it, etc. And that's really, really important to us. So at first, they're just free to copy. So our impact convinced an organization like the Shuttleworth Foundation, well, actually specifically the Shuttleworth Foundation, to invest in it going forward from late 2007 up until earlier this year. And what that allowed us to do was continue pushing that agenda and really trying to have that national impact. And eventually we did. And the thing that turned the tide in our favor was the public sector strike in 2010, when all the teachers were on strike for over 3 weeks. And what ultimately happened was we worked with another community of volunteers from all over the world, 100 of them, and we re-edited those books, and the Department of Basic Education actually printed our free textbooks late last year, 2.5 million copies of them, so that every single grade 10, 11, and 12 learner in South Africa who goes to a government school should have received one of these collaboratively authored, openly licensed free textbooks paid for by taxpayers, which is a great use of taxpayer money, I think, actually, and collaboratively authored by these volunteers. And that's really exciting for us. And at the moment, we're no longer supported by the Shuttleworth Foundation. We have a social enterprise called Siyavula, which means we are opening. Open is very important to us. And we're expanding into life sciences and mathematical literacy. But we work with communities of educators to write these books so that they're available under an open license. And that's really, really exciting. And it's a really powerful opportunity. Now, a lot of people said this is never going to work. And I'm trying to really distill to just a single nugget why it works. But I'll tell you some of my opinions at the moment, because I haven't actually got there yet. One of the most important things is that there's this latent willingness and desire to help education and capacity that's untapped. I've spoken to lots of people over the years. It's been over 10 years now since we started. Everybody thinks it's a good idea. Everybody wants to help education. Nobody knows how. They don't know what to do to help education. So there's this massive untapped potential to help education. And lots of people want to. You probably ask yourself, you don't have to answer out loud, but would you like to help out? And most people say yes. They just don't know what to do. Everyone thinks it's a good idea, no idea what to do. The second thing is that helped make it possible is the fact that we wanted to liberate this content under an open copyright license. There's this single goal that everybody really understands, that you can't corrupt. Because it's going to be under this license which says anybody can take it, change it, adapt it, that it's this information for education that we want to actually liberate. There's this ideal that everybody can buy into for their own reasons, and they can see their own different potential for it. But there's this really simple, clear vision that is very hard to corrupt. And that allows us to engage with volunteers, it allows us to engage with educators, it allows us to engage with policymakers in a completely different way to any other organization. When, it's not a PR exercise, it's not a marketing exercise, there's no hidden commercial agenda. We're liberating information for the youth. And that allows us to bring communities together that collaboratively work on writing these books. And for them, it's a really exciting experience because they learn from it, they learn from each other, they participate. They decide their own real purpose when they come together to work on these books. I mean, there's this idea of liberating the information, but we actually just facilitate and create an enabling environment for that to happen. And that's really exciting. And so, in that process, what happens to these communities, these individuals that have come together to participate, is that they exceed their own expectations of themselves. They are much more creative because they're actually being supportive, because they've got there's mutual respect and a common purpose. And they're really trying to collaborate to achieve that common purpose. And all of a sudden, people aren't fighting with each other. They're really supporting each other, and everybody excels. And one of the pieces of feedback we always get is people feel that they've achieved much more than they could as individuals, and they ever thought they could even in the process. So we've created this environment where, and we just, we're not responsible for writing the books. These volunteers are. It's their energy, their passion, their ideas. We just create this enabling environment. And I think it's scalable, because these communities, they have, we've written one book, but it's under an open license. So communities can form and adapt to their specific contexts and needs. That's allowed and encouraged, and we want people to do that. So we've got something that can scale well, where the communities decide their purpose, and they can contextualize it to their specific needs. They know the needs of their learners best. And so I think we've got a solution that we're busy demonstrating that can really go to scale in South Africa, really be powerful, and doesn't require anything other than people start communicating and working effectively together with whatever resources they have for their local context. I'll leave it there. Thanks.